Welcome. It is time for Conservative Voice Radio. Normally my second hour to host. This is the Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party radio program. Glenn, Jan, Diane, and Peter, who's been recently added to the crew there in the studio, are all with you this afternoon here on KMET 1490 AM. Now, I'm not going to stay with you guys much longer. I'll be here for about a minute, and then I got to get up the road. All right, Jan and Glenn, good to see you guys. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang up my phone. It's all yours.
Happy
thanks
trails.
for what you guys do.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care, Doug.
Well, Doug warmed us up, but I want to tell you guys the headline here, first of all, this week. Abortion and infanticide. We are in the fight of our lives. And why do I say that? We are getting pushback. Listen to these categories, folks. From the judiciary, from the media, from Democrat candidates, from technology, and from the majority Democrats in the House. And as I talk to you about every headline, and these folks are going to jump in on it, I want to point out how these different categories have affected how we look at abortion, and they are telling us, you're not going to stop it, even at the very end when a baby is about to be born. The first one is activist judges, and Mississippi passed a heartbeat law, meaning that when a heartbeat is detected, the person cannot have an abortion past that point because they are a person. They're a human being. Well, a judge stepped in and said, district judge, again, the district judges, he issued a strongly worded preliminary injunction blocking Mississippi. Now, I wish Doug were here because I feel that this is unconstitutional because Mississippi is a state. But I would love you guys to jump in on this one, and then we'll go headline by headline, okay?
Jan, if you will, this is Peter, and I want to just bring up the fact that Roe v. Wade establishes a certain precedent when it comes to viability. Now, and this is maybe where the constitutionality comes into this, but when Mississippi or Alabama has set this abortion law, and the governor signs it, and then a federal judge says it's unconstitutional, he's looking at Roe v. Wade and he's saying that undermines access for women. But Roe v. Wade does is establishes viability. And so if you are a woman and if you go to get medical treatment and then you're prohibited or hindered by that, that is unconstitutional because of what Roe v. Wade has established.
I thought that it was on privacy, but Glenn, what's your take on it?
Well, it's established at a point in time where they feel that it's okay to commit an abortion and it's not a human being. And there's two schools of thought. One is the minute the egg's fertilized, that's the potential of a human being, and people are against it. But once it develops a nervous system, people feel that it can suffer and it has to be stopped. And there's a gray area there, and it's been debated since 1973. The vast majority of the people in the United States are absolutely against infanticide, of course, that's murder, but also late-term abortion. But some statistics they're using, you're talking about less than 1% of the abortions in the United States. But 1% is equal to 6,000 abortions per year. And if you multiply that times 45 years, that works out to 250,000 late-term abortions where the baby is viable and actually could exist outside or live outside the womb.
This is New York and Virginia.
But you guys, we are talking about much earlier. At about 6 to 8 weeks, you can hear the heartbeat.
Right.
So here comes.
So Diane, what's your take on it?
Well, I'm going to add to that too, because usually the woman doesn't know she's pregnant till close to 2 months, and there's your 8 weeks right there.
Right.
It's not as though we're going to talk about it now and then see what makes sense. We're all going to discuss this. We're going to take it. We're going to do what we want to do. We are moving into socialism, atheistic socialism, and all the perks that go with it. And the thing that I just can't, it just boggles my mind how anybody can think that the baby is part of her body. That's a separate person
with a separate heartbeat.
Exactly.
Let me get to the next headline because we have a lot going on here, folks, and I wanted our listener to know just what this wall is coming at us, okay? The next one, they're prosecuting journalists. Why? Because they did some videos undercover where they interviewed Planned Parenthood and actually talked about selling the parts of aborted babies. Now, a judge clamped down on them, and they, at this point, David DeLayden and this gal named Merritt were hit with 15 felony charges for undercover journalism. And if you've ever watched Dateline and NBC, you know they do undercover, right? So, is this constitutional?
I'm not sure, but it's scary. Because it shows you that if a prosecutor is interested in something politically, he can use his position and abuse his position and threaten people that he disagrees with. And so this is happening in California. And,
yes.
And
they're looking at a lot of time if they're indicted.
Our attorney general is pursuing this. Xavier,
yes,
I think his name
Sarah.
Bob Baraka. Anyway.
Now, by the way, he gets money from Planned Parenthood, so right then and there, he shouldn't be allowed to rule, in my opinion, as a attorney general.
He was appointed also and wasn't really qualified for that position, didn't meet the requirements, but it went to court, and of course, the court threw it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kamala Harris is right in there with him, too. They're buds.
She gets money from Planned Parenthood. Exactly. So here we have journalists that have actually are looking at 15 felonies. Our next headline, NPR. You know, I should explain to you that Associated Press, New York Times, whatever, they issue what's called a guide. And what is a guide? It tells the reporters and the editors how they can write a story. There are certain words you cannot use, and you must go along with the PC correct. Now, NPR, which I recently saw a friend of mine posted on Facebook, well, I really trust NPR. Well, listen to this. According to this, NPR employees may not refer to fetal heartbeat, that's in quotes. They may not refer to fetus, in quotes, embryo, in quotes. You are to use this term for an abortion: intact dilation and extraction. How about that? George Orwell would be proud, right, Glenn?
That's a late-term abortion, right?
Yeah.
Definition.
Well, it's definitely extracting something. It's not a tooth.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that these are the most vulnerable in our society, and there's no one really defining where life begins here. We have politicians that are dancing around the issue. We have a pretty good idea that a heartbeat has a lot to do with life, and politicians now are trying to say that it's not even a baby until it's born.
And that's what NPR told its writers.
Right.
It is not a baby until it's born.
So they're undermining.
Well, scientifically, they're totally incorrect.
Yeah,
Diane, you and I have carried children, and I can tell you from that first kick, you know that's a human being.
Absolutely.
And it begins with a flutter, as a matter of fact, in the 4th month.
So this is just another step to control journalists on what's politically correct to speak. Under the First Amendment of the Constitution, journalists are supposed to be protected, the right of free press. And I can see with the last topic in this, they're after the free press to where it's not so free anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be terminated for your job for saying some simple thing. Like I seen these 4 Arabs getting on the plane, and I felt nervous. Now, Ron Williams, I think, said that. on PBS in an interview, and he was fired.
Exactly.
And he's supposed to be somewhat of a journalist.
Speaking of fired, you guys need to fire Pete Buttigieg. This is the mayor that is a Democrat candidate. Let me tell you what he said about abortion, which is our next headline. Quote, if by chance your view on that issue of abortion is motivated by faith, I would point out that this is also a moment for people of faith to think about what it means to support policies and politicians who care about lifting up the least among us.
This Pete Buttigieg is a phony and a fraud Christian. He professes to be for the least among us, but he doesn't consider a baby until it's born. Or it's more extreme than Barack Obama.
Yes.
Barack Obama was not this extreme. And so what Pete Buttigieg tries to do is he tries to normalize this. Now, this is not a very far thing. The next step, I think, is people who are older, who are the oldest amongst us, because they are now the next
Good
step.
point.
Inconvenience.
Yes, they're very inconvenient.
Yes.
They have no one to stand up to defend them.
Right.
And so those in our golden years, those of our grandparents, our parents, even some of us, if we don't protect life, and we know it to be a heartbeat, brain waves, all those things, it's the next step is going to be our older people amongst us.
Absolutely.
Well, in the Ten Commandments, whether you're Jewish or Christian, thou shalt not kill. And so this is exactly that. It's killing. And let's be frank.
Because they deny it is a life until it pops out, they get by that commandment. But we know better.
We know
okay?
better.
Pete Buttigieg was interviewed on Fox, and they asked him about late-term abortion. And he must have knew the question was coming in advance, because he spoke about a woman in a very terrible position to make a decision, how she already has the crib purchased, the room decorated, some clothes purchased, and then she has to make this terrible, terrible decision. And he played on the emotions of the people. He's a deceptive liar, and he's in favor of late-term abortion. He will go along with infanticide. He is a typical Democrat.
You're so right. And believe it or not, folks, we have 3 other headlines on this topic, but we've got to go to a break. And when we come back, I think we should continue on those 3 and then go to our next topic, which is the continual overthrow of our president. We'll be right back. And we're back for the second segment of Conservative Voice Radio. I almost said Constitution Radio, which is Doug's program. I'm sitting in for Doug today. This is Jan Reed, and I'm surrounded by these very nice people, Glenn, Peter, and Diane. And we on the first segment, we were talking about the abortion issue, and we ran over. But basically, what I had pointed out was that we are getting pushback from the judiciary, the media, the Democrat candidates, technology, and the majority Democrats in the House of Representatives. We have 3 more headlines before we go to our second segment, which I would love to run by you folks. This one is even the tech tyrants get into the abortion issue. You should know that in Scotland, they actually took an ad off the Facebook. I'm sorry, not Scotland, Ireland, off Facebook because the image of a fetus in the womb, this is a baby not yet ready to be born, they called graphic or violent. So they removed it. And there was such an uproar that they had to put it back with an apology. And, I'm not going to go to the folks here for that because they've been shocked by censoring before. But I have to tell you about the next headline, which is Cory Booker's insane bill that he wants to bring out should he get elected. Listen to this. He wants to create a federal office that is dedicated to expanding abortion rights. And I'm going to hand it over to you folks. What do you think?
I think it's pretty typical. I didn't look too closely at the article, but I know Cory Booker's, and I know Kamala Harris's, and I know people that are willing to sacrifice these children on the altar of convenience. They're willing to sell baby parts for profit. And they say it's for research, but it's not for research. It's for profit. And they say it's for women's rights. It's not for women's rights. They're just, they lie. And so Cory Booker was exposed during the Kavanaugh hearing as a partisan and as a hack. And he disregards life. And I believe he wants to profit off the death of these unborn kids.
You know, it's possible that some kind of demonic, powerful people control a lot of these politicians. And it looks to me like they're trying to cuddle up to them, because it's hard for me to imagine a sitting senator wanting to actually promote abortion in the United States, because that's really what abortion rights are all about. Expand up to use it for birth control, gender selection, and everything else. So this guy is incredibly evil, and who's he speaking to when he comes out and declares he would like to do that too?
Well, let me tell you, Diane, who's going to help him. Kristen Gillibrand, who is also a Democrat candidate, wants to remove the Hyde Amendment. Now, do you recall what the Hyde Amendment was, Diane?
Tell us.
That is to have to stop the taxpayers from paying for abortion. In other words, the Hyde Amendment said no federal taxpayer money.
Yes, I remember that.
Right. She wants to abolish that amendment. So she's going to help him.
Okay, and somebody says something about that fetus too in Ireland. Okay, but, you know, the thing is the Dems, they think that's their right to play on the emotions, and how dare us, take that. That play out of the playbook.
They say it's illegal to show a mother the sonogram of the baby before an abortion, right? They say that's unconstitutional.
Oh, yes,
you cannot
too.
show a mother the sonogram of the fetus or baby before.
This from the party that says we don't respect science.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
want to say something too about why this is such a big deal. They've been fighting for abortion, since Roe versus Wade, and I think it's this is just a hunch that I have. They really need this to keep going, this abortion, because once they have that settled in, which they pretty much they have actually, and now it's coming up again more, fighting against it, because they'll have that, and then it'll be easier to go after the seniors. Then it'll be easier to go after the Christians.
Absolutely.
Okay?
It all connects. But let me tell you now the final stabbing of this bill. It is legislation that has a euphemistic name. It's called the Women's Health Protection Act. Nothing about the Baby Protection Act.
Of course,
this proposed bill by the Democrats in the House of Representatives would block and upend vital pro-life legislation such as the heartbeat bills. And so, in other words, federally, they are going to say to the states, you are not allowed to pass a pro-life bill. What do you think, folks?
That just shows how adamant they are about it. It's very adamant.
Deceptive liars with that title, I'll tell you that. So, no, it's just beyond the pale what's going on right now. But I will make a prediction right now. Abortion, as we know it today, will be ended, or the United States of America, as you know it today, will be ended. And the raft is going to come down on this nation like you've never seen before. That's my prediction.
I think you might be right, because what happened was we had that rash of states that said it was okay to kill a baby at birth. That's called infanticide. And the New York State Legislature, for our listeners, gave it a standing ovation when it passed in New York about 2 months ago.
Yeah, I don't know if the public knows the numbers, but worldwide, 1 out of every 2 pregnancies ends in abortion. 50% of pregnancies worldwide end in abortion, and in the United States, 40% of pregnancies end in abortion. So 4 out of 10, and this is doubling and tripling as the decades go on, mainly because of the convenience of the abortion, the lack of accountability. Now, we're not into shaming anyone. I think of our sisters out there who have had the tragic experience of having to undergo that, and the regret. I could only imagine. I've only talked to a handful, but it's not about that. It's about an industrialization of this, a mechanization, taking the emotions out of just killing and murdering.
And they have even said that it was racist to talk about the Black community having more abortions than any other community. No, the racist thing is trying to say, go right ahead, Black people, abort your babies.
Well, that's why they
racist.
started Planned Parenthood. Margaret Stranger.
Tell us about
Strangler.
Yeah,
Right. They kill more babies Black babies in New York
it was
that
eugenics.
are born alive.
It motivated Hitler and his clean gene pool idea. And this dates back 1,000 years. You know, we've heard a lot about wicked people in the scriptures. You know, sacrificing children and women to these false gods. And I think abortion, in a sense, has a lot of parallels to bad civilizations becoming corrupted, and they're sacrificing their future for their past sins and their past transgressions. And it's sad, but we can't institutionalize this. We can't take it and make it what it is.
Well, let's go on to our next segment, because in actuality, we could talk about this subject for hours. Lately, in the last few days, President Trump ordered the intelligence community to cooperate with the surveillance investigation. What does that mean? There are a lot of documents that the FBI, the CIA, the other 15 intelligence agencies have that withheld them, calling them classified. The main reason that he declassified them is we want to get to the truth about how this started, how they started to surveil this president while he was simply a candidate for president, and also the continuation of it after he became president. So, as Trump says, this should never happen to another president. So what do you folks think about this declassification?
It's essential to speed up the process. Do you remember when all the documents were floating around in 2016 and the word masking was going on? Oh, this was the unmasking of this person, and this is unprecedented because this was unmasked between these agencies.
Right.
And so Trump is telling the agencies, you don't have to follow the regulations when it comes to privacy amongst each other to keep information, certain types of information. So this direction is good because it's going to speed this process up, and it's going to undermine, I think, what the Democrats are trying to do in the House.
They've been after him for over a year, just bugging him. You need to declassify these documents. Let the truth come out to the American people. Down in Australia right now and in England, they're starting to come out on the news. They're trying to release a lot of information so it won't be a big shock to the British people and the Australian people, how their governments were involved in an attempt to overthrow an elected government of the United States. What these people did, and he come right out and said it at a news conference, that was treason. They were traitors. They were trying to overthrow this government elected by the American people. That's the president of the United States telling people. And he told Barr, go ahead and release it. I just want you to be fair to me and fair to everybody else. So that's where we're at.
And you know, Diane, before I give it to you, I just want to point out that he asked for the release from these agencies. Listen to this: the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of Energy, Homeland Security, Director of National Intelligence, Director of the CIA. If you recall, before the election, Barack Obama said that he was opening up intelligence among 16 agencies within his administration. He literally did it 5 minutes before the election. Why did he do that? That was a big part of the leaking that happened subsequently with this Russia hoax.
Well, he's a big Trump is a big threat to them. I mean, he's going to do this because they've overturned this stone, and there are so many spiders and bugs coming out of there. I mean, and they're going to fight this tooth and nail, just like how they want to keep the abortion thing. If you think that's bad, they're going to jump in, with all fangs and all claws, and they're going to be fighting this because they know they're. You've seen what's going around on Facebook about what Hillary said about it. We're all going to hang, and she's had some expletives to go with it because they know. They know they got all this stuff hanging over their heads, and it's coming to light.
No, the Clintons have been working with the Chinese. They've been working with the Russians. They've been working with petty dictators all over the world for money. A lot of it's been for money. But what Clinton did with the Chinese, a lot of our technology was transferred when Bill Clinton was president of the United States. And Hillary Clinton now, she's transferred a lot of our uranium assets into control of Russian oligarchies. They're right in with Putin. And I just read in the Epoch Times, one of the greatest newspapers being published in the United States right now, that they're going to reopen the investigation into the Hillary Clinton Foundation and the Uranium One transaction, where Hillary Clinton was instrumental in selling out 20% of our uranium to Russians.
The real Russian collusion, right, folks?
And also the real treason. How do you do that to the United States?
Yeah, let's not forget that Comey, gave her a free pass just a month before the election, and then you have Clapper and you have the other goon, Brennan, that are scared right now because of what's happening. But these three goons, I call them, they knew that Hillary Clinton was going to win. They knew it in their heart, and they were planning for it. And guess what? Comey didn't have very many years left at the FBI. And you know what he was banking on? He was banking on a fat retirement and sitting on some board of the Clinton Foundation. They were buddies. You remember that tarmac interview with Loretta Lynch and Comey where they got their story straight and Bill Clinton was standing off to the side. This is corruption at the highest levels, and it's being exposed. And you don't think it's going on in California? It's you guys are living under a rock.
The highest level in the government was when President Obama come out on national television and said when Hillary Clinton had that server in her home, she didn't intend to leak any emails or do any damage. That was the instructions to Comey right there. She did what she did was wrong, but she didn't intend to do it. So let's give her walking papers. That was his instructions to him right on television, just like Comey confessing to Congress that he leaked documents to the New York Times. I think these people need to be prosecuted for their crimes, even when they confess to them.
And one other thing which is very telling is that they learned that Russia was involved in our voting, or at least they were trying to upend our democratic process a year before the election. And you know what they did? They told their own intelligence people to stand down. Yeah. Susan Rice said, leave it alone. You know why? They needed it to pin on Trump.
Trump Jr. come out and said, we spend in 2 hours more than the Russians did during the entire campaign. He said, we do online advertising in 2 hours.
I know. They spent like $175,000 on Facebook, and they called that interference.
And that was nothing compared to what this market is in the United States for presidential elections.
Well, The interesting thing is we could talk about this till we're blue in the face, but the fact of the matter is that when this paperwork is opened up to the American public, they're going to get the picture. They're going to understand what was done to them. And it's not about Trump. It's about saving our republic. This could happen to any president going forward in the future. And we need to guard against it. And
well, I hope it gets to the point where they can reveal it, and they do reveal it.
Oh,
I
hope
bet
so.
Well, they have
it has to get to that point.
They have a propaganda machine that'll be out there trying to neutralize it.
And they're
You
doing
bet.
that right now. But you guys, we've got to go to another break. But I want to tell you that when we come back, we are going to talk to you about a coalition that is seeking to expose the communists in the Democrat Party. Yes, you heard me right, the communists. We'll be right back. And we're back on Conservative Voice Radio. This is Jan Reed, and we're on segment 3, and I'm sitting here with our Tea Party patriots, Glenn, Peter, and Diane. And when I left, I told you that there actually is a coalition seeking to expose the communist infiltration of the Democrat Party. And I'm not kidding about this because actually Trevor Loudon, who has been a commie hunter for years, he has written a book and he's made a movie called The Enemies Within. And in particular, right now, he has gotten serious because there are over 100 within the Democrat Party that have moved up in the ranks of leadership that are full-on communists. And we're going to talk about that right now. But also joining him, you should know, is the Stand Against Communism chairman, Bishop E.W. Jackson. And if you've never heard this bishop speak, he is remarkable. But I want the guys and gals here to talk about just who is involved in the Communist Party. And I know they use the great name Democrat Socialist. But if you look at the background of these people, they were full-on communists and belonged to these various parties. Peter, you want to start with some of the organizations that are?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't look at the article, but the thing is, they call themselves socialists.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist. These people think the socialism is a good thing. And they point to Europe. They point to Western Europe, and I don't think our American people view socialism. The people that hold on to socialism and they promote it. The people on the left, they don't associate that with communism.
Well, they don't, but as I mentioned earlier, they were parts of organizations called, as for instance, the Democratic Socialists of America, Freedom Road Socialist Organization.
Right, and the list goes on and on. There's a million of them.
Right.
And so what they try to say is they're socialists. And socialism, I guess, now has a good connotation because these young college kids have been using the term for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great idea, right? But it's really attached to communism because the means of production and the production in the country have to be forced upon the public. And if you want to look at good forms of socialism, you don't have to look very far. You look at Venezuela, you look at Cuba, you look at Russia, you look at China. Half the people are starving to death. They don't talk about the half of the people that are starving to death that don't have enough to eat. It's always about this ideal that we're going to make everything fair.
In Trevor Loudon's book, he points out there's over 100 communists that are affiliated with communist-leaning institutions. The Communist Party USA, a lot of them just don't go right down and join that. They join with affiliated groups. And Jan named a couple of them. And it goes back a long ways. Roel Rees, our congressman for this area, there's a big chapter on him, or I'd say 2 or 3 pages,
Mm-hmm.
in the book, The Enemies Within. And that exposes some of the things he did while he was at Harvard, going to school, out demonstrating, and with radical organizations. And that's going on with a lot of these people. They're well indoctrinated, and their philosophy is we have to take down the Constitution
Well,
of the United
and
States.
before I go to Diane, we have to take down the president. And let me tell you how. Listen to this. Trevor Loudon highlighted the current Judiciary Chairman, Gerald Nadler, who he alleges has been a member of the Democrat Socialists of America for more than 30 years. Nadler was a member of the Democrat Socialist Organizing Committee as early as 1977. And around 1983, a DSA New York City local report claimed Nadler as a member. And Nadler, as you know, has been the thorn in the side of Donald Trump in trying to take him down. He's the head of the judiciary.
I know who he is.
He's asked for his tax returns. The point being that this movement is part of taking down our republic.
Taking down our freedom. And let me tell you, you could tell what it is by its anti-freedom. And what they all have in common is government's at the center, not you, the voter. Government's at the center. They're atheistic, and then you're a threat if you're a Christian. And the colleges, and I know this firsthand, are separating socialism, like Peter was talking about, from communism. But in this sense, they're not separate. They're the same, because what they all have in common is that the government's at the center, not you, the voter. They're atheistic, and you're a threat if you're a Christian or
You
other.
know, their hallmark
like
is
them.
a strong central power. So when you hear of a conservative say, I believe in limited government, you should just breathe a sigh of relief, because they are not trying to control your life. It's the opposite. They want government to have less power.
And how are our forefathers? Okay.
Yes.
A republic is
Certainly-
not a powerful central government.
Certainly not like Nancy Pelosi, that's for sure.
Okay, some more news. The communist-leaning people in California are passing a law, or may have already signed it, saying that Donald Trump cannot be on the ballot unless he produces 5 years of taxes. And that's what Nadler's working on. They want to try to get his tax returns out so they can pick through them, pick and choose, and start a whole propaganda attack using his income and his businesses. You know, I posted a video of Nadler last night on Facebook.
Oh, how
And it looked like he was having a stroke.
how prophetic of
and
you.
they were running up to him, give him water, trying
Yes.
to settle him down.
He did a Hillary.
Yeah. So he's when they said they're going to release all these documents and everything, I think that's got a lot of them on the verge of having strokes. They're so angry.
Well, getting back to your point, which is a big one, if they won't allow Trump on our ballot, we might as well be in Cuba, folks. I mean, who the heck's running this
like,
country? The
Can
Castros?
it get any more obvious?
Yes.
Yeah, he's more than qualified to be on the ballot. He's old enough. He's president.
He's our incumbent president.
Yeah. So they're communist leaning also, and California is being converted into a weapon to destroy the federal government and put it back under the dictatorial powers of communist leaning leaders, like we had under Obama. I have no
That's
respect
why we only
for
can
Obama, what he
vote for
did.
two Democrats. Between two Democrats, who's going to be the next senator? Because
You know, I
Because of that.
just got a word from our engineer that we have the commie hunter called in and wants to talk about this subject with us. Alex Ferguson is calling in. Alex, are you there?
Yeah, I'm very disturbed that last night on the tube there was a conservative who started comparing these Democrats to Joe McCarthy.
Yes.
One of the things that we have been lied to about so profoundly is that Joe McCarthy was right. Now, when I say that, of course, immediately you get an emotional thing. The propaganda has been so strong that it's almost like saying you're a child molester. But the fact of the matter is that back in 1949, we broke the Russian code for their spies in America. And we determined at that time that the vast majority of the people that Joe McCarthy accused were guilty. There were 200 Soviet spies, that means people who had a control agent and were passing information in the Roosevelt administration. That it was so deep, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote a book called Secrecy. He's the one that discovered the Venona intercepts, which detailed who was a communist and who wasn't. In that book, he talks about 200 agents that they stole every political, scientific, military secret that we had. And what happened was that's where my first experience of the deep state, the establishment, because it wasn't just the Democrats that went after McCarthy. It was Eisenhower. It was the various Republicans. What they were saying basically was, these are our friends, these are our compatriots, you're rocking the boat, we don't want to hear it. So they destroyed McCarthy. Now, I'm not saying he was the best guy in the world. They did drive him into alcoholism. He died a drunk. But the reason was that they accused him, when they talk about false accusations and destroying people's careers, it wasn't McCarthy doing it to other people. It was the establishment doing it to McCarthy.
Alex, that's a big point. And right now, we are in McCarthyism redo. It's happening again. I mean, look at what they're doing to Trump.
They're
and
doing
for this
it to
very
Trump right
reason.
now. That's exactly right. Thank you very much. That was my next point. They're
One
doing
of the
it to Trump
one of the biggest Soviet agents back in that time was exposed by Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon became a very hated man, even though he was one of our greatest presidents, because of the fact of he put Alger Hiss in prison for being a Russian spy. And Alger Hiss, actually a very well-educated man, helped set up the United Nations as we have it today. And he ended up going to penitentiary because of Richard Nixon. And they had it in for Richard Nixon, and they finally got him.
And they ruined him. Yeah.
They got him.
They drove Richard Nixon into a state of apoplexy, and he made mistakes. He did things that were wrong, but it was simply because all his life, all his career, they had been falsely charging him and smearing him.
Alex, thank you so much for the call. We've only got about 40 seconds, everyone. Say bye.
Bye, Alex.
Goodbye, folks. And remember, the Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party, we need you to help.
Yes, and this never should have happened to Donald Trump either. And God bless you, and talk to you again soon.
Stay tuned for Conservative Voice Radio. Peter, hit it.
Yep, on for the social war. I'm ready for it.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. We'll check in with you next week, folks.